And we welcome you to the University of Notre Dame. We're at the Notre Dame studios here on the campus as the Notre Dame senior alumni present the Notre Dame football 22 kickoff preview. Hi, everyone. I'm Pat Scanlon. Well, here we go. The students are back on campus. The campus is buzzing, and we're just 10 days away from the beginning of the Marcus Freeman era in earnest. It's going to be a great hour to talk some Irish football with you. In a little while, we'll be joined by Eric Hansen of Inside Notre Dame Sports and Jamie Uyeyama, who is with Irish Sports Daily. So those guys cover the team on a daily basis, and we'll hear insights from them as well. Also joining me in the studio is my partner for the telecast, Mike Golic. Mike, class of 85, sports commentator, NFL. Great to see you again. I know you've been busy all summer. A big charity golf tournament you ran for the charities here in South Bend. And I think you got to Vegas, didn't you, for a little hangover skit for the Notre Dame Shamrock Series uniform debut?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We got to ask my son Mike and I to be part of that the uniform reveal, and it was a ball. I mean, who's ever seen The Hangover? We tried as best we could to try and imitate a couple of those scenes. We truly did, though, go about a half hour outside of Vegas and make a right into the desert and filmed it there. I have to say that Marcus and Isaiah Foskey and Michael Mayer, they were great. They did a great job because they were asked to do more. That was just one scene that Mike and I were in. They did a couple other scenes that we watched as well. That was a lot of fun. I thought it was a great reveal. Doing uniform reveals and new uniforms for one-offs always gets people to either love it or hate it. We know how that works. But listen, with over 3 million views, I think it worked out pretty well. Fighting Irish Media did a phenomenal job in doing that whole thing. And you mentioned right off the top, students back in town. I enjoy that and I don't, because I have a house here and I stay here half the year and I have 3 dogs. My wife and I, during the summer, take the dogs on campus and we can let them run free because nobody's here. Now all the students are back and they've ruined that, so we have to have them on the leach all the time.
And that hangover skit was a great way to set up the Shamrock Series in Las Vegas. We're looking forward to that. Mike, kind of an air of mystery around the team right now. First-year head coach Marcus Freeman, new coordinators, and Al Golden in defense, Brian Mason on special teams, Tommy Rees. Maybe the shackles are off, on offense. So a lot of questions about what are we going to see in 10 days at Ohio State.
So first, in the macro of college football, we're seeing that kind of change everywhere. There's 30 brand new FBS head coaches that have changed spots or have been, put into that spot, Marcus being one of them, and obviously Brian Kelly leaving here and going to LSU. There's 2, but there were 30. And at the quarterback position, 67 FBS quarterbacks changed schools. Now, neither one of the 2 schools opening up, Notre Dame or Ohio State, worry about that with Buckner and C.J. Stroud, obviously have been there. So it's the thing about Marcus is everybody loves Marcus. Marcus is a great guy. The players love Marcus. His recruiting has been incredible. But even Marcus understands, as we all understand, you're going to be valued by your wins and losses. So he's doing the best thing right now is players are buying into what he's selling. That's one of the biggest things as a coach you're trying to do. Get my players to buy into what I'm selling. That means buying into the new assistants that are here. He's not the D coordinator anymore, so Al Golden's system comes in to play here to buy into it. And that's one of the things he's done extremely well is to get these players to buy into all phases of what being a Notre Dame football player is all about.
Absolutely. And speaking of Marcus Freeman, we had a chance to talk to the 30th head coach of the Fighting Irish. Recently, I spoke with the head coach. Thank you, Coach. Coach, on behalf of the Notre Dame senior alumni, a group that's seen a lot of great football, great coaches, national championships, thank you for taking a few moments for us today.
Absolutely.
Coach, judging from the type of football these guys have seen over the years, many years, how have you judged the passion and love they have for the program that you now lead here at Notre Dame?
I think that they understand what makes Notre Dame special. They wouldn't be here if they didn't. But it's my job is to continue to remind them and for them to continue to embrace the special aspect that this Notre Dame University. I mean, it's so special, right? And it's our job to continue to remind them you get to play football at the highest level, but you get to do it at somewhere special. And we continue to remind them that and embrace what it means to be a student athlete here at the University of Notre Dame.
When the calendar turned to August, how refreshing, how energizing was it with your staff, with your players, to get between the lines and just concentrate on getting ready to play football this fall?
Well, that's what we love to do. You know, there's other parts of our job that we have to do to continue to build our program and to continue to, enhance the things that we do. But coaching the game of football and being around these kids and being on the practice field, that's what we all love to do. And we view that as our relief. Sometimes our players, I don't think view it that way, but this is our outlet. And we really enjoy every minute we're on the field with them.
Coach, then you've talked about the offensive and defensive lines being the signature, the heart of this team, the key to the success of the Fighting Irish. Can you expound upon that for us?
Well, I've said when your biggest guys are your best leaders, those are, to me, the best teams I've been a part of, and we're going to lean on our O-line and our D-line. We have to be able to run the ball. We have to be able to stop the run because I believe they just open up so many aspects on offense, and really they can make offenses one-dimensional if you're able to do that on defense. And so we're going to continue to lean on those big guys. Our O-line and D-line, the history of Notre Dame football has been our backbone, and we'll continue to embrace that.
Always let the big guys lead you off the bus, Coach, right?
Amen.
Thank you for your time very much, Marcus.
Thank you.
Mike, I know you love hearing about the offense and defensive line as a former D lineman, and that's where it all begins, and that's what Marcus Freeman is really stressing.
Well, he really is. You had a couple of young guys in Alt and Fisher last year, and Fisher gets hurt right away. So they're your cornerstones on the outside, and man, are they athletic. Especially Fisher. Alt, I played against his dad when he was with the Chiefs and I was at the Eagles, obviously decades ago. But they are great cornerstones there. Getting Jared Patterson to come back now. Hopefully he's going to be able to get back on the field for the opener with the injury he suffered. But getting him to come back, Zeke Correll has done a great job stepping in at center to have Jarrett go over at guard. So that O-line, which was certainly a weakness, especially early last year, where they had to kind of grow into themselves and some of the young players, is definitely a strength. Getting Harry Heastan to come back, I've been around this game a lot, and I have not seen a guy that teaches and coaches better at a position than Harry Heastan. So that is going to be a huge plus. And then on the defensive side, listen, this defense is ready to go. They're stacked, from very a lot of veterans at the linebacking position. You get in Brandon Joseph, the kid at safety out from Northwestern, but that D line up front, what Foskey brings and what he brought last year with the new Marcus Freeman defense. That is so true, to let the big guys lead, let the big guys eat, let the big guys do it. And they're going to need them without a doubt in this game, especially on the defensive side in this opener to stop that C.J. Stroud-led offense by Ohio State.
They better be ready to go. Ohio State, September 3rd, 7:30 at the Shoe. Just an easy opener, right, for the Fighting Irish as you take a look at, and game day will be there. It really is the kickoff of the season and all the excitement in game week number 1, the top game of the weekend.
So the one thing you understand about week 1 and game 1 is the biggest difference. One of the biggest difference, certainly I found from college to the NFL, is you have training camp and 4 preseason games. Now, how much you play in those preseason games, we'll see. But a lot of teams will practice against one another, which is very valuable in the NFL. You don't get that in college. So the first game can be a little bit of a crapshoot, as far as mistakes, as far as guys. You can run and try and get in great shape, but all of a sudden the lights are on and you're in a real game. You start breathing a little heavier, and hands go on hips a little quicker if you're on long drives. And Notre Dame can be built for long drives with a running attack, with maybe a shorter passing game. We'll have to see which wide receiver can step up and maybe be that go-to guy. But you have a great tight end in Mayer, and you can do, running back by committee if you'd like to as well. You get some bruisers in there and some outside runners and some mismatches in the passing game, but maybe a short passing game and that running game. So now you control the ball. It's the best thing in the world is when you're going against someone and all of a sudden you see some hands on hips, guys maybe bending over, guys going to get that oxygen, saying, okay, we're kind of taking this team where we need.
And really, from the get-go of camp this year, Marcus ran these guys, and there were some guys that were sucking air in those first few practices. And so you think Karen Williams would like to run behind this line this year?
Oh, I would think so. Yeah, I would definitely think so. But it is going to be interesting. It is a factor in shape. Now, this would be a night game, so weather shouldn't be too bad. I don't know where humidity will be, but certainly by the evening it should be a little bit better. But that's something to keep an eye on. Miscommunication. Are all 11, whether offense, defense, or special teams, are they on the same page? These are where the little mistakes can happen, but when you get two powerhouses like this, little mistake can turn into a big play for the other team.
Question is this the Ohio State team that wins 48-45 against Utah State, or is it the one that loses to Michigan 42-27?
Well, I think certainly we know the offensive firepower that Ohio State has.
Stroud, Smith, Najigba, and, of course, Henderson at running back.
Yeah, and an offensive line. They got one of the best O-tackles in all of college football. They always have a really good offensive line as well. So that's going to be the issue. A strength of ours, obviously, is defense, and their strength is, without question, offense. Their defense, I think, can be had. I think if we can get sustained drives against them, again, is Notre Dame going to have that big-time playmaker, that defense stretcher, that guy that can go deep to back off the defense? With Avery Davis going out for the year now, who picks up the slack? I mean, even with Avery in there, it was going to have to get passed around a little bit to different receivers. So who steps up? This is one of those opportunities where you lose somebody, but somebody else gets a chance. Who's going to be that go-to guy, to make the plays down the field? But I think it can be a methodical offense for sure, and maybe take your chances on the big play. And that can work well against what is the weaker part of this Ohio State team, and that's the defensive side of the ball.
And, of course, the Irish come home then for a game, the home opener for Marcus Freeman. Everyone's looking forward to that. It's one of those games. We'll be home for 2 weekends in a row. It'll be Marshall, the Thundering Herd to begin, and then of course followed by California. And it's going to be really interesting to get that close-up look.
So there's firsts now, right? Mm-hmm. Marcus has already run out as a head coach of Notre Dame in the bowl game, in the Fiesta Bowl. But, I put that aside because he's had winter workouts with the team. He's had spring ball with the team. He's had summer workouts with the team. He's had August camp with the team. So this is really now the beginning. He's been able to instill what he wants to instill to the players he needs to instill it to. And now it's the first game, his alma mater, going to Ohio State, of now running out in the regular season. And then, as you mentioned, the next week, he's running out of this tunnel for the first time. He hasn't done that yet. So as much as you just want to make it the next game, there's going to be those firsts that Marcus is going through, as well as some of the players on the team as well. But for Marcus, now he's had the time to set the team he wants, but he's going to experience these first. And quite honestly, if Marcus is like any other type of player, which he was for a long time, whether in college at Ohio State or in the NFL, you want to get these over with. You want to get them done. It was just like as a player, I wanted to get the first hit out of the way. Someone hit me in the mouth, man. Just get my head ringing, just get everything flowing a little bit. I guarantee you, Marcus wants to run out of the tunnel. He would love to tomorrow, as long as he felt his team was ready, and just get this thing going.
And, as a first-year head coach, coming from the defensive coordinator spot, there's a lot of questions that people have. What kind of game management will he be? How will he be at clock management? What on that 4th and 1 and midfield, do you go? It's going to be interesting to see how he assimilates himself as the head coach.
Well, because one of the biggest differences is the coaching part of it will probably be the easiest part of it for him. Now, giving up control of the defense, that's something he's been used to, and now he hasn't been a head coach. So, there's Al Golden, who has been a head coach and now is the D coordinator. It'll be his defense. But for Marcus, I think, because I've asked this a lot of times over my years in this business after playing about first-time head coaches. What's the first thing you do when you sit in the big chair? And all of a sudden, you are being asked questions that you never had to answer before that have nothing to do with being on the field. It's all about the process or the itinerary or in your building, how you want things set up, how you want travel set up. These are all questions he never got asked as a D coordinator. But now as a head coach, there's so many questions that go his way that he has to answer. and think about to get the program to run the way he wants it to run. So luckily he's been through all that. Obviously able to sit with the players and set the team how he wants. But that's, I'm sure, and I've talked to Marcus more than a few times, one of the things that's been difficult, I don't know if it's the right word, but different, because he's never had to deal with it before, is to answer all these ancillary questions about the program where he's sitting there going, well, I never had to answer this before. Now everybody's looking at me for the answer to this question.
And I think that's why Al Golden, defensive coordinator, former head coach, won at Temple, which was a graveyard of coaches.
Right.
And he took that, he got them going, and really then on to Miami, now in the pros, coming off the linebacker coach with the Bengals. As a former head coach, I think he's a great sounding board, and that's a great asset. I mean, I was in New Jersey when Bill Parcells went from defensive coordinator to head coach. He won 3 games that year.
I think it is fantastic that he got a former head coach in, that he can lean on, that he can ask questions of. So I think that'll work out just great. I think that was you look at the staff he's put together, a lot of guys obviously that he knows, younger coaches as well, but Al's been around for a while. So I definitely think it was good to get an experienced coach like that, a former head coach like that, to kind of take this next step with the team and see where it goes, and let him instill his defense, because now Marcus has become the CEO of the team. So now there's no concern just for the defensive side of the ball. He said he loves hanging around with the lines like that O-line. He loves going to that O-line meeting room, but hanging out more with Tommy Rees and getting a feel for the offense. Tommy, I think, is ready to really kind of let this offense go. It's all his now. We know Brian Kelly was on the offense, more on the offensive side of the ball, and had input there or, communication with Tommy. I think this is going to be Tommy's offense, and you're really going to see him manage this thing. I'm very excited for him, because he's a guy that's a hot commodity, not just in the college side of things, but the NFL side as well. So I hope he's here for a long while, and I look forward to seeing what he's got up his sleeve this year.
It's going to be very interesting. All right, let's take a moment. Let's bring in Eric Hansen, longtime cover of the Fighting Irish football program, inside Notre Dame sports. And we won't mention where he went to college as we get ready for the Ohio State game. But Eric, I know we've talked a little bit. You were talking about the storyline behind quarterback Tyler Buchner and Tommy Rees. And tell us a little bit about what your feelings are and what you've discovered about Buchner as he takes over the number 1 quarterback spot.
Well, Tyler Buchner was a guy that Tommy Rees identified very early in his high school career. He came to a camp at Notre Dame before his sophomore year, hadn't even started a game in high school at that point, and Tommy Rees offered him a scholarship based on that camp performance. So that's the ceiling that he saw at a very young age. Now, things kind of went sideways a little bit for Tyler in high school. He missed his sophomore year with an ACL tear. He missed his senior year because of the California COVID regulations. So he came to Notre Dame with not a lot of experience, but still that high ceiling. And I think as we went through spring, we went through fall camp, and really since he's been named the starter, we've started to see him merge closer to his potential. So it's really going to be, I think, fascinating for all of us to see how Tyler Buchner performs in that first game on a big stage.
Eric, how do you see this offense running? We saw the injury of Avery Davis at wide receiver. That was a position anyway where we were all wondering who was going to be the guy who was going to step up. We know what we have at tight end and pretty much at running back. So how do you see this offense developing under Tommy this year?
Well, I think Tommy is the happiest person that Harry Hiestand came back, and we had that conversation about when you have that really good offensive line, it gives you a lot more options. And so I think it's going to be a much more balanced offense than it was last year. Tommy, people say Tommy was handcuffed maybe by the head coach last year. He was also handcuffed by the fact that was a developing offensive line with a lot of growing pains. So I think being a balanced offense, and then when you're looking for playmakers, I think of the wide receivers, I think Lorenzo Styles, whose dad played at Ohio State, is going to be wide receiver number 1. He's the guy that is going to be the big play wide receiver. But with only 7.5 scholarship wide receivers, and I'm counting Xavier Watts as half, part safety, part wide receiver, they need all of those guys because, they're only an injury or two away from kind of another crisis.
And, the running back room is a little thin as well, Eric, but Logan Diggs is practicing and back on the field at this point. You've got the baby bus, Audric Estime, Chris Tyree, the burner, and Gibran Payne there. And it's going to be a little tenuous to keep those guys healthy as we get into the season.
Right. Jadarian Price looked great in the spring, the true freshman. Notre Dame was fortunate enough to be able to get Gibran Payne to sign kind of late, decommit from Indiana, add him to the room. But you're right. I mean, Chris Tyree has a injury history. Logan is just coming back from a shoulder injury. I'll tell you what, Audric Estime has really surprised me with how agile he is, how versatile he is. You think about him just kind of running over people, but man, he can do a lot of things. And then Gibran Payne, the freshman, they've got a lot of confidence in him. He's in the mix for returns, and he can catch the ball. So they have talent. Again, it's just about staying healthy because you can borrow maybe, running backs to do some wide receiver work. You can borrow wide receivers to do some running back works like Braden Lindsey. But when they're both thin, you just got to kind of cross your fingers.
So and now that Buckner is the starter and counted on to be the guy all year, does that preclude him from running as much as maybe people want to see him run? He actually ran more times than he passed last year, but now he's the man. So do you still put him in that position a lot?
I think you probably don't have as many planned runs for him, but you want Tyler Buckner to be Tyler Buckner. I mean, he's a guy that averaged 7.3 yards per carry. And you do feel pretty good about your number 2 quarterback and Drew Pine. So I still think you're going to see him running the ball. I mean, I think defenses would love if he just sat back there and was a pocket quarterback, but his multi-dimensions is what makes him special. So I still think he's going to run the ball, just more ad-libbing than planning to run.
Eric, we talked earlier about first-year head coach Marcus Freeman, how he operates, how he's the CEO of the team. What have your observations been about how Marcus is taking that first-year head coaching role on?
Well, I mean, he's everywhere. I mean, when they went to St. Patrick's Park during training camp to run a hill, and Marcus was on the hill with them, he lifts with them during the winter morning lifts at 5 or 6 in the morning. Marcus is there actually getting sweaty with the guys. He's earned a lot of respect. I think what's fascinating to me is Marcus distributes his time a lot different than any other head coach I've ever been around, in that he's not very involved in the offense. I mean, he's watching it, he's interested, he's learning it. But Tommy Rees really has control of that offense. Charlie had his hands in it. Brian Kelly had his hands in it. Lou Holtz had their hands in it. Marcus is recruiting. He's doing other things. So it's really curious to me how the veto system works on a 4th and 1, for example. How that gets communicated. Those are kind of the little things. But I'll tell you what, as far as a leader and a guy that sets a great example in practice, he's pretty impressive.
Yeah, listen, at this point, he really hasn't done a whole lot wrong, but there hasn't been a regular season game yet. So, and as we all know, that's what you end up getting judged on. All right, let's go over to the real side of the ball, the defensive side, where you win games. We know a lot of the talent on that side, from Foskey up front to a very veteran linebacking group, getting Brandon Joseph, the transfer from Northwestern. But talk about the corners who are certainly going to be tested in week 1 against Ohio State.
Yeah, Cam Hart is coming back from an injury, and he's been active in fall camp. When you look at him, I mean, he's 6'3" and long, and he's a difficult matchup for people. Then you kind of get beyond that. You say, well, what does Notre Dame have there? And I think the guy that's kind of stepped forward has been Tariq Bracy. Tariq's always been kind of the nickel guy. I think he will be your every down cornerback with Cam Hart right now. and that when they want to play three, Clarence Lewis will come onto the field and then Tariq will move to nickel. But I think that first group will have something to prove in this first game beyond Cam Hart. The thing I really like about what's going on with the cornerback room is the depth. They've got two very good freshmen in Jaden Mickey and Benjamin Morrison. Those guys aren't playing scout team. They are key backups and key rotation guys. And then Chance Tucker, who's a sophomore, he's in the mix too. And Notre Dame needed that. Those cornerbacks, were playing hurt. They were playing a lot of reps last year, not coming off the field. So I think it's encouraging to see the depth there. But yeah, Ohio State's going to test them.
Eric, don't go away. We're going to talk to you a little bit more, but right now I'd like to bring in Irish Sports Daily's Jamie Uyeyama, who covers the Irish, does some game analysis, and also is a recruiting specialist. And Jamie, we talk about freshmen who are having an impact this year. There are quite a few that you've identified that are really stepping into that 2-3 deep.
Yeah, well, Eric mentioned the two corners. I think those guys definitely need to be highlighted. Jaden Mickey and Benjamin Morrison, like Eric said. I think they really needed that. They needed that kind of depth there at corner. Defensively, I think Notre Dame has probably been in a better position just depth-wise than they have been in a long time. Like linebacker, they have so many players with experience. They're guys that I think are ready to kind of take the next step to maybe become elite. And then they have like young guys like a Jalen Sneed, who was a very highly rated guy who came in the spring, maybe didn't look like, he was that ready to play. And he came in, he was like 198 pounds. Well, he's put on 20 pounds and he looks like a different player in fall camp compared to the guy that he was in the spring. And he looks like he's going to be a heck of a player down the line, and they might not even need him. Right. And then there's Junior Tui Halamaka, who, I mean, anyone who watched the Blue Gold game would have noticed him. He's a guy who flashed a lot, specifically as a blitzer. But then there's Bo Bauer and JD Bertrand inside, probably in front of him. But, he might be a guy who's too good to keep off the field. Right. And then even on the defensive line, they're so deep. But a guy like Tyson Ford and Aiden Gobert, the two of the defensive linemen that they signed in this class, these guys in a normal year are probably competing for the rotation. The chances are they're going to be scout team guys this year. And that's just kind of what they've done and what they've built and developed on defense. And it's a good problem to have. And offensively, obviously you mentioned Payne. He's a guy who's probably going to have to play at a necessity at receiver. Again, depth wise, that's an issue. But Tobias Merriweather, who's the big, 6'5" receiver, tall, like silky smooth, but fast, looks kind of like a guy like a Clemson type of receiver. Notre Dame doesn't usually get those kind of like lanky builds. He's a bit different than a Chase Claypool or a Boykin, just a little bit smoother than those guys. When they first came on campus, those guys were a little bit bigger. But man, he's just got an incredibly high ceiling. And I don't know if he's going to help right at the beginning of the year, but I think by the end of the year, he could be a guy who really helps. And then, I mean, unsurprisingly at tight end, you got Holden Stays and Eli Raridan, obviously whose father played for the Irish. And both those guys are really, really talented. And Raridan especially, man, and he's a guy coming off an ACL injury in high school too. So you weren't sure if he's going to be ready to play, but he just might be too good not to keep on the field. And obviously you have Michael Mayer, you got Kevin Bauman, you have established guys there. But, especially with the wide receiver room, you might have to play more tight ends than you expected to. And Raridan could be a guy to watch.
Yeah, that's where I was wondering with both those positions. Who will end up getting more time, more tight ends or more wide receivers? So from the freshman standpoint, do you see more of the freshman tight ends getting time or a guy like Merriweather who looks to just be, like you said, an incredible athlete? Mm-hmm. Which position group do you think of the younger players gets more time early on?
My guess is it'll probably be the tight ends, just because I think, I don't know. I think it's a lot to ask. It's even though it's more physical and you got obviously they have the blocking element of it too, I just think it's a lot to ask to be a day one, like a Michael Floyd type at receiver. Just those guys don't walk through the door very often. And I'm not sure if Merriweather is quite ready yet. So I think it might be more of a slow burn with him, like kind of what we saw with Lorenzo Styles last year, where second half of the year, he really took off. And obviously he had the monster bowl game. That's what I could see from Merriweather. And I think with those tight ends, I think they're going to have to play a lot of 12 personnel, probably more 13, right? With 2 or 3 tight ends on the field. But they can be a little bit more versatile, because I think you're going to see Mayer split out. He played in the slot about 50% of the time last year anyways. You're going to see him line up on the boundary out wide too. So I do think those tight ends are going to be used.
And I think you've got some Kevin Bauman's healthy this year. He's a solid number 2 right now. As you say, Raritan. And I think, based upon the offensive line and the 4 running backs that you're counting on, you may have to go with a more 2 and 3 tight ends.
Oh, I think they definitely will. Like I said, I think this, and Jamie, you can agree or disagree, I think this is going to be a more ball-controlled offense until they find or get a proven big-time hitter on the outside at receiver, that this is going to be a running game, whether it's a running back, a quarterback, and a more to mid-range, short to mid-range passing game.
Well, yeah, I agree with you, Mike, because I think you look at, it's a little bit like that 2020 team where, at receiver, they didn't have the greatest depth at receiver that year either. And it took a while for even Javon McKinley, who was a veteran but hadn't played that much. And it took him a while to kind of really emerge. And then Skoranek was kind of hurt early on, and Ben Skoranek was hurt early on in the
And there's modern technology.
And we got a little. We'll get back to Jamie there.
Yeah, it happens. We're in the Zoom era.
That's exactly right. But it is going to be interesting, especially with that offensive line being such a force with Fisher. When Jared Patterson, who's an All-American center, moves to guard because things are going so well at center with Zeke Correll, that's pretty interesting.
This is classic Harry Hiestand. I'm getting my 5 best linemen on the field. That's what he wants to do. And he says 5 sets of eyes all seeing the same thing. That's what he wants. So Zeke has done a good enough job to prove that he should be the center. And Jared, obviously, is good enough to be switching at those positions in there. So I think that was a great move and something not shocking out of Harry to keep this offensive line and build it up to where it needs to be, because we all know where it started last year wasn't good.
Absolutely. Jamie's back with us. Jamie, what about the kicking game for the Irish? That's another area that's very different from what we saw last year with Blake Grupe and McPherson kicking off and John Sott coming in from Harvard as a punter.
Yeah, I think the most encouraging thing, heading into the fall camp, I think that was probably one of the biggest worries for Notre Dame fans. I think people saw the blue and gold game. It wasn't exactly pretty for them. Practice reports, the practice we weren't at a ton of practice in the spring, but when we were there, the kicking was a little bit inconsistent. And, you went from Justin Yoon and John Doerr, and you had that kind of stability there at the position. And Grupe obviously had done well at Arkansas State and, made 80% of his kicks last year. And Brian Mason had mentioned that as soon as kind of Sott came in and he was established as a holder, that
it's amazing. You see him, and he's a little kid. He's
very thin. Right?
Yes, he is. But I saw him booting 55-yarders. I mean, so it reminds me of those tiny golfers who have that incredible swing and knock it 320 yards. He is. He was getting the ball through the uprights. I mean, it was fun watching him kick with some distance.
Mike, one guy we haven't mentioned tonight, and really one of our All-Americans who came back, Isaiah Foskey, looking at that sack record for his career, needs 9.5 sacks to tie Justin Tuck, who was unbelievable for the Giants. Stephon Tuitt, who went on to a great career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, I think we got to give some kudos to Foskey for coming back to lead that defense and sticking around trying to win a national championship.
Well, when Marcus got hired as a D coordinator, I know Marcus's defense, I really thought and I had said it publicly, so I looked good, so I was happy. I said, this defense, Isaiah Foskey is going to flourish in this defense. And he obviously did. Coming back, listen, you never know a guy's reasoning of why he wants to come back. I think he got a second or third round grade for the NFL, I believe, in that area. There is zero question that he could bump that to a first rounder. So from a business standpoint, you take the chance of injury, but you come back to a team that could be an excellent team this year, and you can upgrade to a first round, which, listen, now it's your profession. It's a hell of a lot more money than the second round. So I'm not sure which. Maybe it was a combination of all those decisions. You know, Jared Patterson made the decision to come back as well. Mm-hmm. His grade was a little lower than Foskey's, and I think he understood how Harry Hiestand could help him improve that as well. Plus, coming back now to an offensive line that we've been raving about. But Foskey, I love watching this kid play. Moves he's going to use, counter moves he's going to use. He'll be an NFL-ready guy with the way he's playing, with his size, with his speed, with his strength. So he's going to be fun to watch and a great leader of that defense.
Speaking of the NFL, with Al Golden coming from the Lions and from the Bengals, I mean, he's got the tools in the toolbox.
Yeah.
He's loaded with a defensive line. Adam Alola's back. He's got, Riley Mills is a name that everybody's talking about in camp. The linebackers, Kaiser, Bauer, Bertrand, Patello, Maris Liafu coming back from an injury is back. So, there's a lot of talent out there that's, just teeing up. Jamie talked about the secondary, but linebackers and defensive line.
Yeah, and one of the things, especially on the D-line, something I was part of from college through the NFL, is depth, because that's where you're going to rotate. Offensive line, you see those same five guys. Those five guys play all the plays. That's just how it works. On defense, you look at the better teams in the NFL, they are usually 6, 7 deep. Can you rotate through and not have some drop-off? There's going to be some, because rarely you're going to find 7 guys that are exactly of the same talent level. So there'll be some drop-off, but you'd like a little drop-off. So getting any kind of rotation system in there, whether it be some at linebacker, but mostly at D-line, to stay fresh throughout games because of all the times you're going to be rushing the passer is key. And that's something I know Al obviously knows, and we'll try and develop. So it's not just the starters you're looking at. Like when I go watch a practice or I'm watching tape, it's not just the starters, especially on a D-line. I'm looking at that next guy that comes in. How good is he? How much is there? Is there a fall off? And if there is a fall off, like I said, there's normally some. How much is it? The closer you get those backups to starter ability and the more you can just rotate them around. Let me tell you what, it is damning for an O-lineman, again, who is playing every play on play 70 in the fourth quarter when you're seeing these guys come popping in fresh, getting in that high stance, getting ready to come off the corner on you. That could be a demoralizing thing. So that's a huge thing, especially for a defensive line, is to get that depth that can rotate through.
Right, let's take a look at the 2022 schedule. Of course, it begins with Ohio State. Then we come home for Marshall and California here in South Bend. But it's an impressive line. North Carolina, the BYU game in Las Vegas, the Shamrock Series game, Stanford at home, UNLV, Syracuse, Clemson. Everybody circled the calendar for November 5th. And then Navy, BC back home, and winding up with Southern Cal. So it's an interesting mix, and a lot of questions with the opponents this year. How will North Carolina bounce back after sort of a disappointing year last year? Stanford, are they making steps again? And Southern Cal turned their roster over with.
Well, I think the two biggest questions. One, it's weird to see just one Big Ten school, isn't there? I mean, up there. I know we have the number we have to play in the ACC. I get it.
And that could change.
Yeah. Oh, yes, yes, it could. But the two biggest questions to me: how much has Clemson come back? Where are they back now? Where are they back to? What level are they? And for USC, as you mentioned, with the roster change, one of the schools that had both of what I talked about in the beginning, a coaching change and a quarterback change. Quarterbacks are in the portal all over the place, and USC is a place where that has happened as well. Big time receivers out there. They have talent. So that's probably the two biggest question marks to me is how much back is Clemson, and what will the roster turnaround be at USC?
Let's bring in Eric Hansen. Eric, what are your thoughts on the schedule this year as you take a look at it? How many years have you been covering the Fighting Irish now?
I would say I've been at the South Bend Tribune since '88. I've been primarily covering Notre Dame since '97. So right after the Holtz era.
So what do you think of as we take a look at the schedule again, how do you think things line up this year? What are your observations?
Well, they're not easing into it with Ohio State. I think the BYU game in Las Vegas is really intriguing. I think BYU could end up being a pretty good team. I know people are concerned about USC and what they're going to look like at the end of the year with Lincoln Riley being the head coach. And that stretch from Syracuse to Boston College, those are four pretty good defensive teams last year, especially Clemson. I think Clemson's going to be elite defensively. So that's going to be a very interesting stretch too. I'm not saying Syracuse is a great team, but they had a really good defense last year. So that's an interesting stretch. But by that time, Tyler Buchner should be who Tyler Buchner's going to be.
Yeah, I really think with a lot of these teams we're playing that the O-line and running game is gonna be the difference. It's just gonna wear teams. I know there are times when it's closer against teams we should be beating more closer than it should be. But I think they have an O-line and a running attack and a quarterback, again, who can move and run, and obviously a great tight end. As I said, a kind of a controlled offense that is really going to be able to wear down some of these opposing teams. Some of them. Now, Clemson, as Eric said, Clemson's defense, they got a couple D linemen that are ridiculous, and their defense is going to be tough. But I think for the most part, that O-line is going to be really relied upon, as well as that running game.
And we know Boston College is going to come in here loaded for bear with a former Notre Dame quarterback, Bill Jerkovic, at the helm. And so, that's going to be a very tough game. And they'll close it out on November 19th on the home series.
Yeah, that's Boston College. And again, you get a guy coming back who, whenever you leave a program and then play that program, there's always something a little extra you want to give. But I'm not going to lie, I'm not worried about that game.
Let's bring back in Jamie. Jamie, what are your thoughts on the schedule as we take another look at the what lies ahead for the Fighting Irish?
Well, I agree with you guys in terms of, we obviously know Clemson. I think they're going to bring a great defense in that game. That defensive line is nasty. It's going to be the best one they faced all year. I think BYU, what makes them interesting is because I think that's probably going to be one of the better offensive lines that Notre Dame's going to face all year. And I think Notre Dame's strength on defense is the defensive line. That's going to be a pretty good matchup, right? And I really agree with Mike, where I think that's the difference between Notre Dame and a lot of these teams is up front. And that's why I think Notre Dame is set up to have another really good year, because they're going to be better than just about all these teams in the trenches, right? Just better, deeper, just more talent, better pass rush. And I think that ultimately is going to be why they're set up to have a really good year.
Let's take a look at our home schedule, which is moving right along. And a lot of interest in of course, the Clemson game in November, but tickets are in demand at this point. Cal sold out, BYU, a few left for Stanford, and Clemson. Yeah, there are a few tickets still available. So that public service announcement from the Fighting Irish there. And,
I would hope that would be taken care of, and we'd see sold out on all those games. That's what needs to be happening here.
I think it will be in short measure, particularly the Marshall game, which is Marcus's home debut, as the head coach, etc. So that should be really interesting, And as Jamie pointed out, BYU 10-3 last year.
Yeah, and I agree about the O-line. So that'll be a good test for our front seven on the other side. And it still seems wild. Notre Dame and BYU in Vegas. I don't know. I know I'll be there. And as I said, when they built that stadium, they should have put blackjack tables in the suites. I would have been really happy if they did something like that.
They have them everywhere else in the airport.
That's exactly right.
You get off the plane, they're there. So
up in the suite saying, hit me while I'm watching a Notre Dame touchdown or something.
Absolutely. Mike, we took a few questions from folks ahead of time, and one came in today from Jeff Stevens, who's a class of 85 person. He said, what can the Notre Dame senior football alumni do to build on the momentum of earlier this year and continue to connect with the current players and recruits? Are there events planned for key Notre Dame football home games to connect, the players with former players? And I know Marcus did that in the spring, and that was quite an interesting event.
The Legacy Weekend, my son Mike came to it and was an absolute hit, putting the current players in with some of the former players just to talk, whether it's about football or life after football. Listen, we know how this game works. 2% of college players make it to the NFL, but 90% think they're going to make it to the NFL. And that's fine. That's fine to have that as a goal, but make sure the degree is on the other side. And Notre Dame is one of the best connected schools around the country for these players. I thought it was a great move by Marcus to do. I know Hunter Bivin, former offensive lineman here, was kind of putting that together. And I would imagine, I highly doubt Marcus is starting off his career doing a one and done where that is concerned. He is welcoming back the former players to make them a part and wants his players to see those players. So I would imagine there will be more with involvement with former players and current players.
This question is going to be for Eric Hansen. It comes from Kathy in Washington. Jordan Botelho is a player who many of us have been intrigued by, seems to have elite skills. Is this his time to step up and make an impact? Eric?
Well, he's intrigued me and confused me during his first couple years at Notre Dame. He's a supremely talented player. Played linebacker in Hawaii as a high school kid, was recruited to Notre Dame to play the Viper position, which is the defensive end where Isaiah Foskey plays. But I think Al Golden has brought a lot out in him. I think he's a kid that's matured, and with the different packages that Al Golden has, he's kind of a hybrid linebacker and defensive end, and he seems to be finding himself in practice. I think there's going to be certain teams where he is a very good matchup for Notre Dame, and you'll see him play, I think, a significant role, not as a starter, but as a guy that's in certain packages.
I think that's one of the biggest differences that we've seen in football and both college and the NFL level is the hybrid guy. Used to be called a tweener. It used to be a tweener player that didn't have a place in football. Too small for the D line, too big for a linebacker. But now these are hybrid players, and coaches know how to use them in certain situations that Eric said may not be as a starter all the time, but against certain teams in certain packages. That's why you see more rotating going on. And there's the rotation of having good talent, as I talked about earlier on the D line. But then there's the rotation of having a guy fit against a certain offense maybe better than another guy. So this is football of today. I mean, this is what Belichick does all the time with the Patriots, is the versatility of players to be able to play multiple positions.
Well, you allude to Bill Belichick, the NFL. One of the things I found interesting that Al Golden said was that, and Marcus had pointed out, that talking about halftime adjustments. And Al Golden said, no, in the NFL, it's series by series by series adjustments, which I thought was really interesting. I'm really curious to see what kind of a scheme he plays and just, how that defense responds. And the fact that, having that former NFL coordinator as your coach really grooms you for that next level as well.
Well, what it's going to also teach these players is how to break down each series. So when you come off the field, you're not just sitting there, drinking your water or getting your oxygen or whatever you need to do. It's what did you see out there? What are they doing out there? Are they doing what we had game planned? Are they doing anything different? If it's different, what are they doing? Show us on the whiteboard. And then you make adjustments off that. Al is absolutely right. You don't just play and sit around and wait for halftime. You make these adjustments on the fly. And it helps to have smart players as well as good players who could recognize things that are going on the field, come off the field and say, hey, coach, we practice this, they're doing this, or they're doing this more. They're sticking to this one part of their offensive scheme more than we thought they might. So Al's able to make adjustments on the fly. So the communication when you come off the field is obviously key, and Al can really hone in on that and say that that's not just for the NFL, that's for college as well.
Absolutely. Here's a question from Gary in Dallas. I want Jamie to answer this one if he can. Is Drew Pine the clear number 2 quarterback, or would Steve Angeli have a chance to pass him at some time during the year? Angeli, of course, had that great blue-gold game, won the game on a final drive, young man from North Jersey. But what do you think of him, Jamie, and can he assert himself, do you think?
I think Steve Angeli's looked incredibly poised when he's got opportunities. It's against threes, like a lot of other freshmen, but probably has looked more poised than any freshman quarterback that I remember in recent memory. Just, he's got a confidence back there, and he's been accurate. He's shown that he's a pretty good athlete too. Obviously, he scored that touchdown in the blue gold game. I think he's got a chance to be a pretty good player. I don't think that he's going to be the backup this year. Maybe if he has to play, he's kind of shown that maybe the lights might not be too bright for him. But I think Drew Pine is a pretty darn good backup. He's already gone out and proven that he can play at a high level. He came in against a very good Wisconsin defense and helped Notre Dame, move the ball, put points on the board in that game. Obviously handled himself pretty decently against Cincinnati too. So I don't think that Pine is going to lose that backup job, but I do think I am high on Angeli in his future.
Yeah, I love watching young quarterbacks, whether it's quarterbacks who were really good in college and now go to the NFL. You're back at the bottom of the totem pole and you're learning and everything's faster. And then there's the freshman quarterback in college who comes from high school and all of a sudden everything is moving faster. And I know, again, it's against the third stringers, but that's all he has to go against right now. But I enjoy watching, not for how the play ends. I don't really watch that with a young quarterback. I watch the process. His process from walking to the line, looking at the defense. Does he understand what he's seeing? And then the coaches get him in the film room afterward just for that. All right, when you walk to the line, what did you see? What did you interpret out of that defense? Because obviously what you see, then you have to know in game plan what they're going to change to at the snap of the ball. And then how quickly do you make your decision before that play is going? If it's a pass play, you kind of already should have an idea in your head on where you're going with the ball. How quickly do you get it there? Are your feet set? Do you have happy feet? Are you moving around? There are so many things to watch with a young quarterback. And when you hear just what Jamie said, that looks like he has a lot of poise, that's a great word. Mm-hmm. That's a great word because that sounds like a guy who is not afraid to stand in there, but also maybe ate the playbook a little bit and understands a good amount of it. I don't know how much Tommy is feeding him right now as a freshman, but that's the biggest thing. I've told my kids at other points. My one son was a tight end, the other was an offensive lineman. I said, the one thing that you can control, you may get beat physically on a play, but the one thing you can control is a playbook. And for a quarterback, the playbook we know is difficult, but you can devour it and know it. So the better you know it, the less you're thinking and the quicker you're making decisions.
And Mike, whoever's at quarterback, they're going to be looking to Mike Mayer.
Yeah.
I mean, and how do you defend this guy? He's just, he wound up being second team All-American tight end, which is kind of interesting, but obviously a high first round draft pick projected at this point and really unstoppable.
Well, let me just say first, I know in some of the publications it's been Bowers from Georgia. Mm-hmm. That kid and Michael Mayer are it.
Right.
And now there's a lot of really good tight ends in the country this year, but they're the elite. Mayer will be the first tight end taken in the draft this year. Bowers just a sophomore. He'll have to come back one more year. He'll be the first tight end taken next year. They are absolute studs. Mayer is sitting there at 6'4", 6'5", 260, can block. I mean, but again, Notre Dame needs to have an outside threat because if they don't have an outside threat, you want to try and bang him on the line, which you're not going to hold him on the line, but you just want to try and get a piece of him and then let somebody else take over. If you don't have guys on the outside to take pressure off of Mayer, that means more guys on defense can be looking at him, and trying to knock him off course or stay with him. He's still going to get his catches. He's still, going to be the best tight end, he and Bowers, in the land. But it could be made more difficult if they don't get outside guys that can help. I think he did average over 11 yards a catch last year, which, is really good, at that tight end position. And I know he can stretch as well. He's just fun to watch. I mean, he just throws people around, yards after the catch. I mean, he fits into this tight end U. I mean, how many tight ends we got playing in the NFL? Check him off as the next one in the first round next year.
Yeah, I think he's chasing some numbers from Ken McAfee, who had some of the all-time records at that position. That's a while ago.
Yeah, that is. And we've had some great tight ends since Ken McAfee.
Absolutely. And, they talk about tight ends, and sometimes Mark Bavaro gets overlooked. Which is amazing with the pro career that Bavaro had.
Guy came in with me. I mean, just one of the toughest players I have ever played against in practice, and then played against him in the NFL as well. But, these guys have just more catch numbers in today's game.
Absolutely. Let's bring back Eric Hansen for a moment. I want to ask him a little bit. One of the things he wanted to talk about was injury concerns, Eric, at wide receiver, injury concerns at running back. The numbers just aren't there quite yet. So what are your thoughts as we look ahead to the fall and trying to keep those guys healthy and take advantage of maybe 2-3 tight end sets?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Xavier Watts made a very unselfish move to cross-train at 2 positions. He's an ascending safety, probably has a chance to be a starting safety next year, and certainly in the rotation this year. And he's taking reps at wide receiver to help make sure that there's a little bit of a safety net there. Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas, 2 sophomores that have shown some promise. They were banged up during fall camp. We've seen them in full uniform the last couple days. So maybe that's encouraging. Joe Wilkins is finally on pace to be ready for the Ohio State game. He broke his foot in spring practice, and that would be a big deal to have him healthy for Ohio State and beyond. Again, running back you've got 4 healthy running backs right now, but you have injury history with Chris Tyree and Jabron Payne. So again, you kind of hold your breath. But if Notre Dame can stay healthy at those positions, I think they have the talent there to surprise some people with their skilled players.
Another position, not skilled players, the offensive line, Eric. That starting group, I love. Not sure how deep they are just yet. So where are we with Jaret Patterson as far as coming back from his injury?
Jaret Patterson had his right foot in a protective boot today, and he was over to the side with the other injured players doing kettlebell stuff and upper body exercises. Now the thought was, and he got injured on August 15th, that it would be 7 to 10 days of rest before he really could do anything. And then at that point, it becomes pain tolerance. He has told Coach Freeman that he's feeling pretty good. So I think he's optimistic that he'll be able to jump back in practice next week. But as of today, he was on the side, at least doing some strength work.
All right. Well, Eric, we appreciate you joining us. We'll be reading Inside ND Sports all fall long, and thank you for your time. And let me turn to Jamie for one wrap-it-up thought. Jamie, as you look ahead, have you thought about how the Irish are going to fare in this 12-game season? Do you have a number in mind at this point, or are you just you're going to hold your cards?
I mean, it's tough to pick a number because I think when you look at it, I think, when you say the Vegas number is 8.5 games, and I think over on that, I just think Notre Dame talent-wise, compared to just the schedule, it'd be very tough to see them not winning at least 9 games for me. But you have this challenge at Ohio State to begin the season. You have Clemson. You know what Clemson's going to bring to the table. Even if they don't get their offense figured out, they still won 10 games last year, and they have this great defense. They're still going to have that talent-wise. They still going to have this great defense. And then you got, obviously, BYU. That's going to be a very challenging game, right? And, we don't know about USC yet, right? And that's kind of the unknown. But, chances are even when USC is down, that game is usually a tough game for Notre Dame, right? So I think Notre Dame has a chance to be a college football playoff contender, even if, they are to lose this opener. But I think in overall, you look at how the schedule works itself out with those teams. It's going to be tough to run the table and all those games. They probably have to go undefeated or 11-1 to make the playoffs.
All right. Jamie Uyeyama, I want to thank you for joining us. Irish Sports Daily, we really appreciate it. Mike, final thought from you.
Well, they can only lose one game. Sitting in as an independent, you got one game. And that's pretty much, unless other teams fall out a little bit. And I think they can do that. I think they can go 11-1, and I'm not saying the first game would be the loss. So I don't know where it would be, but I do think they can be that good, and I think they have the ability to make it.
Mike Golic, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.
A pleasure once again. Good luck in the fall, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts throughout the NFL season as well.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
A couple of programming notes. The Notre Dame Senior Alumni has a golf tournament coming up in September at the Warren Course. There's still a few tickets left for that one. We appreciate it if you would come out and support it or do a little sponsorship for us. And a raffle to Scotland. 7 days in Scotland, $100 a ticket. Great opportunity to come out and see some great golf and enjoy St. Andrews, etc. And so that wraps it up from here at the Notre Dame studios for the Notre Dame Senior Alumni Group. We thank you for joining us. Thank you to Eric Hansen, Jamie Uyeyama, and, of course, Mike Golic. I'm Pat Scanlon. So long, everybody.